You cannot really afford it, but you feel this competitiveness to
Yeah.
keep pace with some of the other mothers in your mom frame.
Ask yourself one question. What do I have to prove? I'm telling you, that one question, what do I have to prove?
Yeah.
What are you trying to prove? Because what's the worst that can happen if you can't get it, if they don't have it?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Thanks for tuning in to the Money Therapy Journal. Remember, anything that you take care of is going to become even more beautiful, and that includes your money. So we have a really great show today because we're moving into May, which the focus is going to be moms, right? So we're going to do some loading up today with one of my favorite financial friends, which is my college friend, Stephanie, who is a mental health therapist. Okay. So she's going to help us do a deep dive on connecting the conversation between motherhood and money, what it's like to kind of tell your children no,
Mm.
and how that experience can have an impact on them, how you can over yes them, as well as just how your relationship with your mother can also be playing a role in how you relate to money. All right, Steph, you ready to dive in?
That is an interesting conversation.
That is it. We're going to load it up just a little bit. We're going to load it up.
I'm excited to see what's going to come out.
Let's see. Whatever comes up, comes
Okay.
out.
Okay. All right. Whatever
All
comes
right,
up, comes out.
so let's
Uh-huh.
get started there. So there is this, one of the things when moms, for instance, one of the biggest things that I'm for sure that some of my friends undergo,
Uh-huh.
some of my clients undergo, and largely I see on social media, just individuals just experiencing this level of mom guilt.
Hmm.
Yeah, mom guilt.
Yep.
Either there's mom guilt attached to what they can buy,
Mm-hmm.
or if they do buy it and the level of entitlement that can begin to create within children. So I think that's kind of like our starting space in just talking about just you as a mom,
Okay.
helping your children form healthy relationships with money.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a really good one.
Yeah. So when you say mom guilt, because the first time when you say mom guilt, the first thing I think about is moms feeling guilty about getting their children into certain spaces. Is that what you're
Yeah,
referring
so
to?
it can be, so mom guilt largely when we hear it in this particular culture,
Mhm.
oftentimes I hear moms either complaining about what they cannot buy,
Yeah. For
right?
themselves?
Yeah, either they feel guilt surrounding what they cannot buy for their children, what they
Okay.
will not allow them to buy for themselves.
Yes. Okay.
Some of my friends who have more discretionary money,
Yep.
sometimes they feel guilt in terms of how much they may overspend when it comes to their children. And
Yep.
I just want to get into some of that inner dialogue
Yep.
as it relates to how are those experiences kind of washing out,
Yeah.
in the long term once we do your 18 years in childhood,
Yeah.
but then how are we dealing with when mommy is always saying yes?
Yeah. Totally.
What does that look like?
I think it goes to the back to the ideal. So like you said, how were you raised?
Mhm.
So if you were raised where you're getting everything that you want, then that creates a level of expectation that that's how you're supposed to show up as a mom for yourself.
Yeah.
Or if you're raised where you didn't get a lot of things that you want, you can go two ways. You can either try to overcompensate and give too much because you didn't have it,
Mhm.
or you can say, you know what, I like that how this shaped me to be,
Mhm.
so I'm going to do the same things. So we all have decisions to play. We can either go in the route where our parents took us, or we can go in a completely different route because we believe that our parents didn't take us in the right route.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense for the mind to seek balance. So
Mhm.
even if we, for myself, so I'm sure you know this, but I was the only child for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And so largely what my childhood was like was an overabundance of things. I
Yeah.
always had an overabundance of
Mm.
things. I was the first baby in the family.
Mhm.
I'm the first granddaughter, the
Mhm.
first niece,
Mhm.
the first daughter for a long period of time. So how that worked out for me in the way that you were sharing
Yeah.
is that largely the expectation, definitely I would say, just because what my childhood was like, largely just very expecting, very expecting, which can be good. It can be good to expect the good.
Mhm.
And then when you move from that realm of expecting the good
Yep.
to the space of being entitled
Mm.
to the good,
Yes.
not respecting other people's boundaries
Yes.
surrounding their personal budgets,
Yep.
surrounding their different phases. So just being able to kind of intellectualize that experience for myself
Yeah.
can also help me identify it when I'm working with some of my own clients in terms of where they will be when it comes to this ideology of mom guilt.
Mhm.
Either they will feel some level of guilt in terms of, I'm not doing what my parents did for me.
Mhm.
So I see people overspend or underspend
Yep.
in that particular way. And I do like what it is that you said, is that oftentimes, depending on what you might have received, the role that that is playing, either your mind is saying, we're going to follow this pattern, or we're going to deviate and go into the other direction.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
And I think in these cases, it's so important to understand. This is what I use to
Mhm.
help me. I say to myself, my child
Mhm.
has her own story.
Yeah.
She has her own story. And a lot of times I think, especially as moms, is we, based on what we were raised as, we want our children to have a certain type of experience.
Mhm.
We have this ideal.
Mhm.
I want to give my child what she needs, or I want to be able to give my child what she wants, or more
Mhm.
than what she needs,
Mhm.
or I want to be able to give my child, what she wants, all of those things.
Uh-huh.
But this ideal is going to shape the way our expectations of how we should be moving.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times life just doesn't play out that way.
Yeah.
It can get messy sometimes. So when certain things happen, like you run into a financial bump
Mhm.
or burden or some type of hardship, and you have this ideal in your mind, it's hard to kind of let that ideal go and say, okay, well, this is what it is. And my child may have a completely different experience than what I planned.
Mhm.
And am I able to be okay with that and say, okay, well, my child has their own story to tell,
Amen.
and it may not look like mine.
Yeah, I think that's a real huge gift, Stephanie. I
Yep.
think that you just relaxed a part of my
Mhm.
thinking mind in
Mhm.
terms of getting out of the space. I have my two boys, a 12-year-old and a
Mhm.
14-year-old. And because I receive such an abundance, oftentimes I'm transferring that over to them,
Yep.
and oftentimes not allowing them to
Yeah.
have their own story,
Totally.
like kind of step out of the way. Let me hold a pen. And I know if there's one thing that my children will probably say is like, can you just let me write a bit, like get out of
Right.
the way. This is my, and they've gotten better at being able
Yeah.
to communicate about that. So
Mhm.
in terms of the mom guilt, would you say that you experience any levels of mom guilt yourself?
Let me tell you something. Okay, so I was raised with two parents,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful home, beautiful family,
Mm-hmm.
healthy,
Mm-hmm.
functional.
Yes.
Both of my parents were happily married, and I had every plan on giving my child the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And divorce knocked on my door,
Yeah.
where the mom guilt I experienced was, but wait a minute, I'm supposed to give my child that too.
Yeah.
She's supposed to be raised in a two-parent household,
Yeah.
in an environment that she feels loved by both parents at the same time, and not having to, okay, these days you can go over here and that was so beyond my plan. Not only was I experiencing that, but I was also experiencing financial hardship at the same time.
Yeah, of
So
coping with that. Yeah, this is changing my child's story while changing my story. Yeah.
100%.
Mhm.
So not only was I able to give her the story that I wanted to give her,
Mhm.
and then on top of that, my mom passed away.
Yeah.
So the grandmother that I wanted her to experience, she didn't get an opportunity. So when I say all around,
Yeah.
it was an all around transition. And that was the moment where I said, okay, obviously, this is my ideal that I have. This is what I want her to be able to experience. But she has her own story, and it's not going to look like mine. That's where I had to completely relinquish control.
Mm.
That's when I realized I was not in control.
Yeah.
And that's when I had to be okay, radical acceptance. I had to be okay with the way life was panning out versus the way I wanted it to pan out.
Yeah.
I had to be able to accept that. And then once I was able to accept that, that's when I was able to say, okay, you know what? I don't know why her life is looking like this,
Yeah.
but I do know what?
Yeah.
there's something amazing coming out of it. And that's not my story for her to
That's really
write.
good. I mean, Stephanie, that's a gift. And I mean, I always think of really great reasons to have you as my friend, but that just added to the list,
Yeah.
right? That added to the list in terms of allowing, I think you just freed me. You just
Mm.
freed me in a way that I probably have held myself captive
Yeah.
as it relates to allowing, the particular story that you would want. Because one of the things that, and to touch on that, I know that, our friendship during the period of time
Mm.
where, you lost your mother
Mm.
during that particular time in your life.
Yeah.
And maybe about 2 years before that, I'd lost my grandmother.
Mhm.
And my grandmother had played such a significant role
Totally.
in my life as
Mhm.
it relates to my identity, how I relate to money, how I built my confidence and all those kind of things.
Mm.
So I had to, and just now I just had this moment. I wasn't ready to do it yet, but you just, showed me to the light in terms of, okay, that's not the same story. You
Mhm.
understand what I'm saying? You have
Yeah.
to allow for another story to be written, because my story is also very different
Yeah.
from my mother's story, very different from my grandmother's story, right?
Mhm.
So we oftentimes create this level of mom guilt.
Yeah.
I often hear the adage where people are saying, well, I'm going to give my children
Experience.
everything that they did not have,
Yes.
right? That's always
Mhm.
this thing that a lot of moms have where they want to give the child a different story.
Yep.
But being able to relinquish that space and
Yeah.
just allowing the child to have their own organic story based on the characters and the settings and the chaos and the peace that is happening, to allow them to build the parts of themselves so that
Yeah.
they can form their own identity, rather than me forcing the one that, that
Be
relieved my mom guilt.
because you don't know who you're raising.
Ugh.
You have no idea who you are raising. So who are you to write your child's story for you?
Oh, in such a forceful way.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because what could you be hindering
Mhm.
from that child, their growth, their development?
Yeah.
What can you be hindering if you're trying so hard to
Yeah.
write their story
Yeah.
and to have control over the ideal that you have or that
Yeah.
you want?
Mhm.
First of all, naturally as a mom, you want to protect your child.
Yeah.
You don't want them to experience any type of hurt.
Mhm.
You don't want them to experience any type of hardship, any
Mhm.
type of opposition, any
Mhm.
type of pain. That is what mothers do.
Mhm.
So naturally we're going to try to protect our children from all of those things.
Mhm.
But it's all of those things that create the character and the strength and all of those things that our children grow up to have.
All right, so let's get into, we're gonna pull it out of the theoretics, right? We're gonna pull out of that, and we're gonna come into some tactical things, right?
Yep.
That children may undergo that we may be stopping them from trying to control. So one of the things that I haven't personally identified with this, but I do
Mhm.
work with some of my clients, and I do see a social space where sometimes moms feel the guilt that they cannot buy the same things that their
Mhm.
friends are buying. Largely, this happens for birthday parties,
Okay.
and it happens around the holidays.
Okay.
What type of, outside of any, you just solved all the problems. You just solved all the problems just saying, hey, well, this is your own story. So
Yeah.
what is the story behind that particular story where you financially just,
Cannot do it.
you cannot really afford it, but you feel this competitiveness to
Yeah.
keep pace with some of the other mothers in your mom frame?
Ask yourself one question. What do I have to prove? I'm telling you, that one question, what do I have to prove?
Yeah.
What are you trying to prove? Because what's the worst that can happen if you can't get it, if they don't have it?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember being of age, and I didn't have a lot of things that a bunch of friends that had the trending toys and all of those things. My parents had 4 children.
Mhm.
I was the last.
Mhm.
And they went through their own spaces of financial hardship and all of those things. And there were times where I couldn't have those things. But at the same time, I don't know what kind of gift my parents had, but something else was the focus.
Yeah.
Whether it was fun, whether it was family, whether it was togetherness, whether it was whatever that was, something else was the focus. So I would ask myself, okay, well, what do I have to prove where I feel like I need my child to feel like she's included?
Yeah.
But what if your child's supposed to learn that she's not going to be included in
Yeah.
everything?
Yeah.
What if her gift is to learn that she's not supposed to fit in with the crowd all the
Yeah.
time?
Maybe. Yeah.
What if it's learning how to be okay with not fitting in with the crowd?
Mhm.
Once again, because you don't know that child's story.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know if you're raising a CEO. You don't know if you're raising a president. You don't know if you're raising a child in high spaces. And what are those high spaces usually?
Mhm.
Lonely.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a lot of people up there.
Mhm.
So I hate to say this go with the flow thing again,
Yeah.
but allow life to happen
It's such a gift, though. I
and
know
play
you
out.
say that in a very candid way, but
Yeah.
it's really like a gift. So
Yeah.
if you finding yourself in the spaces where you financially cannot afford,
Yeah.
you need to just allow yourself that particular space
Yep.
not to afford. I cannot financially afford it. And then whatever your child learns in this space of this particular deficit,
Yes.
we don't know how to build. I'll
Yep.
give you an example. One of the things that my older son, my 14-year-old, and and you can touch on this for me. I love having like a handheld therapist here because sometimes I get out of hand. So you can help me out, bring it in a little bit. So and I would say, people don't really have personalities. They have adaptations, right, to their environment, right? Totally, right?
Yeah.
So they've adapting. So one of the ways that my son has adapted in a positive way, because he does have his maladaptive behaviors, but the positive adaptations is that he can kind of notice when I'm exhausted. He notices when I'm exhausted, and he will come in and he will cook. And
Wow.
the way how my 14-year-old cooks, you will think that I sent him to a chef school.
What?
I put him in a few different classes when he was maybe between the ages of 3 and 8, and he goes to YouTube University. But when I tell you this boy can fry chicken,
What?
he can make rice. So it's one of those spaces where you're just not wanting to, he can kind of notice it, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of his lessons where he can kind of notice that my mother is a little overspent, but if I was constantly and consistently in this superhero mode, you know what I'm saying? Not allowing him to develop some of these skills that he's going to need to care for himself, then I'm doing him a disservice. So this whole space of kind of like going with the flow, going with the cash flow, you feel that it's becoming a little cliche, but I really like it.
Yo, it's not putting up so much resistance.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people realize that a lot of mental health issues comes from putting up a resistance.
Yeah.
Anxiety,
Yeah.
depression. There's so many issues. Something like multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
I'm trying to resist getting into a space to be in the space that I want to be in, opposed to taking on the mindset that I hate it here. This sucks. I want to get out this as much as possible, but there's something here that I should be learning.
This is amazing. Yeah. So that's the recipe for mom guilt right there.
Yeah.
Just wherever it is in that space where you cannot afford. And then there's this other space that I like undergoing is this growing space within your motherhood. Because I remember myself when my boys were much younger, right? And I remember, and sometimes people are like compliment me and they'll say this and that, this with your children. But I went through phases where I was unrecognizable to myself because I had those boys back to back. They were 2 years apart, 19 months, and this was a very difficult time in my human space.
Yeah.
Again, I was the only child for 10 years. So sharing space with other human beings at this level was very different for me. That constantly needing me, this constant codependency was just very, very taxing, right? So now I am more stable as a human being. I've had the opportunity to be at this work for 14 years. My son will be 15 this year. So in that particular space, the child has had the opportunity to grow with me.
Yeah.
And in this growth, there's a different financial space, right? So there's this, we lived in these limitations and then the space of just kind of like moreness. And I think your way of kind of just going with the flow. So if you're finding yourself in more of this abundant space, right? And you have more resources than you had at the beginning, but you still kind of feel a little bit of guilt for what you give to your children. How would you address that part within the mom guilt space?
So if you are in an abundance space, what type of guilt?
Okay, so sometimes, right, people feel like I'm going to spoil this child. Either you're receiving from others based on the wherewithal that you have access to in terms of money. Sometimes you will receive judgment for how much time you spend with your children, how much money you spend on your children. You can receive these levels of guilt. So I would like to kind of get a level of coping for people who are having to, take that in.
Yeah. I'm gonna say this again. It goes back to your relationship with self because you still have to act. It always comes back to the point of what do I have to prove? If I'm doing great for my child and I'm getting a level of guilt, if I'm not doing good enough for my child and I'm feeling a level of guilt, there will always be 100 different people that's going to offer you 100 different opinions.
Yeah.
You can't please everybody.
Yeah.
So, where do you have to be with yourself in order to be okay and content with the space that you are in?
Hmm.
No matter what people are saying, no matter what people are feeling about it. We are allowed to parent differently.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to look the same.
No.
You are allowed to give your child nothing while I am allowed to give my child everything.
Yeah.
And if I am so caught up in what I'm getting back or what I'm getting returned from it, why? Why am I caught up in it?
Okay, so I've heard that judgment from the
Mhm.
social space where sometimes people have judged me for the amount of time that I spend with my children. Yeah, I'll get that type of judgment as it relates to just how much time I'm
Well,
spending
we
with the
know people
children.
on social media just bored.
Yeah, it's not in the social media space.
No?
It's largely in the reality space. I once
Okay.
had a friend tell me that, just like how you're talking about, what are you going to get in return?
Yep.
So someone said, well, you just never know how these children are going to turn out. You don't. That's true. That's a true
Yeah.
statement.
Mhm.
But it was almost like the amount and the proportion in which I was giving to my children, whether if it was educationally, financially, or just socially,
Yeah.
they deemed it that, what if you never get anything back is what their judgment was. Yeah.
But it's not my story.
Yeah, this is true.
We're not giving to get back.
Yeah.
I mean, will that happen? Probably.
Yeah.
But that's not, it's for them.
Yeah.
It's for them to take and to develop whatever they choose
Mhm.
to. Now, my children can take whatever we give them,
Mhm.
as much or as little,
Mhm.
and do absolutely nothing with it.
Yes.
And guess what? That's their story.
Yes, this is true. This is also someone's story.
And then they can take that and do everything and apply everything. And guess what? It's still for their benefit.
Yeah, this is true.
It's still for their well-being.
Mhm.
So, we're going to have to be okay with whatever decisions that we make. We're not going to be perfect parents.
Mhm.
No one is going to be a perfect parent. We're
Mhm.
all going to make mistakes. I believe we're all going to put some level of trauma on our kids.
Would you say trauma? Or did you say trauma or give them negative experiences? Because
Maybe negative
negative,
experiences,
maybe
but
negative, because sometimes I mean a little bit. I can look in my space and I can see in
Mhm.
some spaces where I may have transferred some level of trauma. I would like to just say
Yes.
negative experiences,
Yep.
but I can look at my overparenting in
Mhm.
some spaces where not really giving this person enough space to create their own story. So
Because it comes from our unhealed
yeah, it comes from that
spaces.
but I was a little slightly overparented as well. I was
Okay.
slightly, and you were also very sheltered as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
when
to a
when you
degree,
really
yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you
I
really think
was
about it.
naive
Yeah.
and green.
I don't would I say you were naive? I
To a
would
certain point. I mean, I got out there, but yeah, I was unaware of the world. I thought everyone thought like I thought.
Yeah, but I don't know. So you feel okay. So a part of your shelter, which I've
Yeah.
always admired,
Mhm.
the relationship that you have with your mother and your father, and just generally just your family and how that shaped you as a person.
Yep.
So, but you feel that this gifting, one of the other sides of it, is just feeling I would say sheltered, which is a level of protection, but
Yeah.
you describe it as being naive.
I was a little naive.
I
I
didn't
was a
see you
little
as
green. I believe I have some level of street smart. I think I can catch on quick.
Yeah.
But naive meaning unrealistic expectations of people.
Okay. All right.
Just different experiences, different disagreements. It's kind of like, oh, well, why would you make that decision? Or why would you treat me that way? I would never do that to you. Like, that type of stuff. But
Right.
being in certain environments taught me a lot pretty quickly.
Okay.
So you probably didn't see it as much, but it was there.
Okay, I would never describe you as one of my friends that was, I would say you'd be inexperienced, and I think that inexperience, that, was very helpful to you because some things that you went without. So that part of the motherhood, money, just guilt framing in that particular way, just,
Mhm.
I think, just allowing for that other story. So even in this space where you allowing children to create their own stories,
Mhm.
when would you kind of recommend to a mother that there's a level of corrective action for themselves.
Yeah.
So let's say that
Mhm.
you are constantly financially rewarding your child
Yep.
and they have poor grades.
Mhm.
Let's say you're still going out on that, that birthday party
Yep.
and you really cannot afford it. So at
Mhm.
some level, when do you move from, okay, this is the flow of your story to
Yep.
some level of corrective action
Mhm.
when you're kind of seeing that your behavior is now influencing
Yeah,
theirs?
the moment you recognize it.
How? What if it's not easy for someone to recognize that they're in a pattern that is irrational? What are some telltale signs
Okay.
that you can kind of see it? I identify one, constantly rewarding a child who's disobedient and disrespectful.
Yeah, or feeling the need to prove yourself is a huge one.
Yeah.
I have to get this because if I don't get this for my child, she's going to be the only one or he's going to be the only one that doesn't have.
Yeah.
Or if I don't get the iPad or get the iPhone, then they're not going to be cool.
Mhm.
And a lot of times these can trigger our own things because
Yeah.
if we felt like, oh, I was the unpopular, I was the uncool, I don't want my kid to experience the same thing, we'll find ourselves stepping outside of our values or what we want for our children just to heal or overcompensate that space.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like it.
So that's one of them. But recognizing what do I need to prove? This is what we need to ask ourselves. Why do I do what I do?
Uh-huh.
If we can just ask ourselves that question, why do I feel the need to do this? Why do I feel if my child is getting bad grades, why do I feel the need to constantly reward them with this? What am I trying to? And it's just asking ourselves those questions that causes us to get into more awareness of ourselves because you can't change anything if you're not aware of it.
This is very
You
true.
can't change it.
Yeah.
How many of our friends gonna be like, you probably should do this better? How many people?
Yeah.
I don't know. Would you ever call me out?
We've called each other out many times. We have that kind of space
Maybe
with
we
each
can do
other
that.
generally, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm constantly getting insertions. I can't say, but you and I have that kind of vulnerable space where we can
Yeah.
call each other out in a very
Yeah.
safe
And
way.
and if you have people like that around you, that's gonna be like, oh, probably should, you know, what if you did it this way instead? I mean, obviously not unsolicited, but
Mhm.
but I think if you had those type of people around you, who can kind of point you, okay, be careful of this because this
Yeah.
could happen, which
Yeah.
I've had those too,
Yeah.
those people.
Mhm.
Hey, be careful with this. I've had experience with this and it kind of, and now you can become aware, but you need some level of awareness because without the awareness, nothing is going to shift. Nothing's going to change.
I like it a lot.
Yep.
Okay, so this has been another episode of Money Therapy. Hopefully, you were able to get an ATM, something that you can do at the moment. I'm Shawnee Curry. You just got the opportunity to hang out with one of my close friends who's a mental health therapist, Stephanie Tomlinson. And remember, anything that you take care of will become more beautiful, and that includes your money.